Good morning. Good morning. Welcome, everybody, to the Saturday Morning Mastermind. I'm your host, Samantha Studebaker-Carl, broadcasting to you from beautiful Indianapolis, Indiana. And I'm here with my good friend, Catherine, and we are going to be talking about, let's see here, okay, The Soul of Money by Lynne Twist, and it's chapter 7, which is Collaboration Creates Prosperity. But before we get going on that, I want to give Catherine an opportunity to introduce herself. And for those of you who are watching, give us a like on this video, subscribe to the channel so you know when we upload the next video or when we're doing the next live stream, and share with anybody you think that would find it helpful. So, Catherine, go ahead, jump out.
Good morning, this is Catherine from Boulder, Colorado, and I think we have Dan's normally with us, but he's not feeling well this morning, so prayers out for him. And hopefully Sandy will jump on. She might be commuting or something. She tries to get on here when she can, so looking forward to today's discussion. It was a very cool chapter, I thought.
Yeah, hopefully Dan will be feeling better soon and can join us the next time, and Sandy too. I'm not sure what she's doing. I haven't heard from her this past few days. But yeah, okay, so chapter 7, Collaboration Creates Prosperity. And let me just read this first little thing in here. It says, there are no haves and have-nots. We are all haves, and our assets are diverse. In the alchemy of collaboration, we become equal partners. We create wholeness and sufficiency for everyone. And she starts this chapter out with a little story where she is traveling and her brakes go out on her car, and it's the middle of let's see, she says it's like a Friday night, I think. Yeah, it was Friday night. She'd been in a meeting all day. She was exhausted. Her brakes go out, and she's driving around trying to figure out how she's going to get her brakes fixed because no place is open. And so she pulls up to this auto shop, and of course the lights are all dim, but she walks up to the garage door, and it's kind of like she sees that inside the building they've got all of the auto equipment pushed away, and there's a piano sitting in the middle, and there's people all milling around like they're having a party. And she, so she ventures in there and she finds the owner, and she's like, I'll pay you anything. I'll pay you anything to fix my brakes. I just need to get back, worn out, all this. And he's like, sorry, lady, we were having a party, but our piano player didn't show up. And so if you know how to play the piano, we'll fix your brakes. And they, he said it as a joke, but it turns out she actually did know how to play the piano. And so then she plays the piano for them. They fix the brakes for her. Everybody's happy and they have a great time. And that's how she starts this chapter out, with collaboration. And I thought that story was just so fascinating because it happened. It all came together in a way that was something that you could have never planned in a million years, and yet it was perfect for everyone. And what I thought about after that too is, like, when you go to have something fixed at an auto shop or anything, you call up a plumber to fix something for you. They come in, they fix it, and you pretty much never hear from that person again, or you don't really have much to do with them. You just pay them some money, they do their job, and they go about their way, and you go about yours. But in this situation, I found it just so interesting because of this collaboration, and just imagining her playing the piano for them, or for all these people that are his friends, is that she actually establishes a relationship with these people. And I was just sitting here thinking about how, she'd be playing the piano and they'd all be dancing and having a good time and cheering her on, and she'd be having conversations, and almost like she was just supposed to be there in the first place. And I don't know. I just thought that was just a really interesting thing, because she not only did she get her brakes fixed. I mean, that was kind of almost like a side thing. It was more she just developed this amazing relationship with these people that she would never have otherwise had if they hadn't come together in this kind of collaborative situation accidentally. So I just thought that that was a fun little story. What did you think about it, Catherine?
Yeah, I love that story. I'm beginning to think and believe that there really are no accidents. Like it's, I see it every day in my life, and this story just, solidified that. It's like, you think something horrible's gone wrong because her brakes are bad, and then it turns into just this beautiful friendship and relationship. And what are the chances that they were having a party that night, and what are the chances that she could play the piano, and what are the chances that they would even offer that option? I mean, it's all too perfect. And I see it like every day, in driving for Uber of all things. Like, I'll really be, maybe it's a little slow and I'll be wanting a ride, and then a ride comes up, and then I start driving that way and they cancel. And then, at first, when I first started driving, that used to upset me. Oh, they canceled. Why did they cancel? Like, I would take it personally, like, oh God, did I give them a ride before and I did something wrong that they didn't like? Or, the mind is just cruel. And now I'm just like, yes, they cancel. That means like my next ride is going to be an airport ride. And it all, like, it happens, it's, or the next ride is, somebody that I have an amazing conversation with, that, uh, you know, maybe they needed to some support or something that I was able to give, or we exchanged, knowledge. Maybe I needed something that they knew about, or, I mean, it's almost, it's not almost, it is a perfect setup. And I don't know how or why, um, something as simple as, the rides will start to die off, and I'm kind of questioning what's going on. How come I'm not getting any rides? And then I realize, oh, I haven't eaten today, and so I'll take a moment and I'll eat. And as soon as I finish the last bite and take a sip of my drink to wash it down, I get the ride. Like, it's like, it's just this perfect setup. And so I think that's pretty much why, and it's been said in a lot of different religions and spiritual beliefs in different ways from by different writers, but to always be grateful for the challenging times, as well as the the perfect or rewarding or everything's going right times, because that brings something else. And I think we've seen this throughout this book, as this lady goes to all these different countries where, they're just barely surviving, and of course not everybody is surviving, and yet the most amazing and beautiful collaborations and experiences and relationships um, come out of that sadness and that despair. And this chapter really focuses on the collaboration aspect. Like you read at the beginning, there's not haves and have not. Like, we all have something to give. And I think that's so important to keep in mind, because sometimes we feel like we've given everything we have and we have nothing else. That's it, period. you know, and yet, you know, that's usually because we've focused down on one specific aspect, like money, and now we're out of money, but that doesn't negate all of our wisdom or all of our just loving support, or whatever that we still have that we can give. Um, and I thought that this chapter it has a lot of stories in it that just go to prove that everybody, even if you have nothing, you have something to give of yourself. And those givings are the most precious and the most powerful. And I've thought a long time, because I've lived in places that have a lot of natural disasters. And it's always just seems like that has to happen because it brings out the most beautiful collaborations of people. Um, when I lived in Oklahoma, a tornado would come through and destroy an entire town. And at first, everybody is just, of course, completely devastated. But then you start seeing everybody helping one another, people that didn't know each other that are now will be lifelong friends. And it's just so amazing the way the world works. It astounds me. Like, I'm just in awe every day.
And you mentioned living in areas where disasters happen. It's interesting because we lived for, I want to say, 7 years or so on the White River in Indianapolis, and not on the river, but on the edge of the river. And the area that we were in was in a fairly frequent flood zone. We were in this little neighborhood that just kind of ran down in this little valley right along the edge of the river. And so we would get flooding, fairly frequently. Of course, we lived in a house that was raised up, so the basement was on the first floor, and then, our living space was on the second floor. So when we would be hit with flooding, it would just, it would be like we were on a houseboat there for a little bit. Um, but anyway, so in that little neighborhood, whenever we would, hear, okay, we have that potential for flooding, then a lot of the neighbors would come together and we'd all work together to get our stuff out of the basement and up to the upper level on our deck, or stuff out of the garage and take it up the hill to be out of the flooding area. And it was just it was interesting how we just come together like that. I mean, we knew that this was going to be happening, and we knew we only had so much time. We all got to get our stuff to a, safe area so it doesn't get washed away or ruined or whatever. And, and we had another time when we were living down there, when my husband, of course, he was a truck driver at the time. And so there was a lot of times when he would be over the road. And one of the times he was out, I don't know, Iowa or something. And that was when we were going to be hit with this flood. And, he just like called up a couple of friends, and they were like, oh yeah, we'll go help your wife. And they came in, and the neighbors were in, and everybody was helping move and stuff. And it was just really interesting how we just tend to do that naturally. And then we get this, survival of the fittest thing that, supposedly is what the world is all about, but yet it's totally not true. I mean, we don't have that. And I think that that's a learned behavior. And I was reminded of something else along that lines of, I don't know, it'll come back to me, but anyway, let me read this next little part here. Is right after she tells that first story, she says, collaboration and reciprocity are natural, and yet in the world we inhabit, competition and the fear of scarcity often block us from seeing these ways of being with one another. In a you or me world, reciprocity and collaboration don't fit. A you and me world is full of collaborations, partnerships, sharing, and reciprocity. In that world, our resources are not only enough, they are infinite. We bring the practice of collaboration and reciprocity into our conscious view in everyday life. A kind of alchemy and prosperity await discovery all around us. And I was sitting here thinking about that, the you and me world, or you or me world. And I feel like, there is a lot of the times it's just like this you or me, or it's, every man for himself kind of thing. But when we come together and we help each other out, everything is easier. So why do we do that to ourselves? It just makes no sense to me. But, I kind of thought back over our lives and was trying to think of all the different times that we've come together with someone else in some way and helped each other out. And, since my husband and I have been together, um, when we first moved in together, we met this neighbor, and he was struggling in his relationship, and he had a couple little girls, and he needed to get out of that situation, but he didn't have the means to do so. And we were moving into a house, and we had extra space, and so we were like, well, hey, just move in with us and get yourself, up on your feet, however you need to do that. And and of course he had two kids, and at the time I had a newborn, and so we kind of helped each other out with the kids, and we helped him out by helping him have a place to live, and that worked out really well. And then and after that happened, then some of the same kind of things. My parents were in the middle of getting a divorce, and my littlest brother was struggling with what was going on there and just needed some other place to be. And so we were like, hey, just come and stay with us, get yourself out of that situation so you can focus on you. And so he lived with us for a while, and then my sister lived with us for a while, and my other brother lived with us for a while, and all of those relationships helped us as well, because I had kids, and so we helped each other out in those different ways. And the more that I started thinking about it, I was like, oh, well, there's this and this and this, and all these different things that happened over the years that just were collaborative efforts more than anything. And I forget that sometimes, and I think we all kind of forget that sometimes. It's like, how can we work together in different ways to help each other out? Why do we get so focused on just, you know, only me and myself, and my, I don't know what it is. We just get lost in the I don't know. What do you think, Catherine? You ever feel that way?
Definitely. Pretty much everybody's culture at one point was very community based, and it takes a village to raise a child and all that, and it really does. And then there's, certain groups of people who are very open to um, multiple marriage partners, where there's like 6 wives or whatever. And when I was younger, before I had children and stuff, I thought that that was just horrendous because I'm a very, one-on-one monogamous kind of person. After having children and seeing the work that it takes to raise a family, keep a household, work a job, mow the grass, go to the store, I became much more open to that possibility. I was like, man, these people know what they're talking about because it takes that many people, like it just would lessen the load. So, I mean, think about a lot of the stress that would come off, and everybody would get enough sleep maybe. And, I mean, I'm not saying that I'm ready for that type of a situation, but I'm just saying I understand it, how that could work because, like you said, when you had people living with you, you just, there was just more hands to do the work. And I don't know why, because, everybody, if anybody's watched this show, I'm a total hermit. And I don't know why it's almost like self-punishment to take everything on to your own shoulders and not be willing or open to sharing responsibilities and workload with other people. And I don't know why we do that. And I know I'm not the only one. Like a lot of people do that. And I struggle with that a lot because uh, my family all lives in different states. Like my son's in one state, my daughter's in one state, my parents are in another state. And of course, I know that my parents are getting older and I probably before too long need to move there and um, just be able to spend more time with them, and as time goes by so fast, you guys. And And I think about, well, I've never really been able to live with my parents. Could I really live with them now? And, what sort of situation do I need to look at there? And how's that going to work? And, or I think about, do I need to move closer to my daughter or closer to my son? Or, my son has a lot of struggles. Maybe he and I should move in together. And can we get along? Or is that just going to make things worse? I mean, there's so many aspects to look at, but I can tell you, like here where I live, it's a very affluent community, and the housing prices are just out of this world. Like they're just insanely crazy. They were bad before Google came. Then Google came, it got worse, and now I hear Apple's coming. So, but there's like these huge expensive houses here that hardly anybody can actually afford. So a lot of people do the whole housemate, situation. And as much as I prefer to live alone, because of where I live, I'm forced to live, with housemates because that's the only way I can afford to live here. And I have to say, like, I mean, I have wonderful housemates, so that helps. But it's great not to have to cut the grass. There are things that are off my plate now that if I lived by myself, I'd have to be doing all of that or paying someone to do it if I was unable to do it physically. Um, Now we don't, share meals and stuff like that, like some households do. We're sort of like semi hermits living together, basically. But it really helps financially. I would have to pay 3 times what I'm paying right now to have my own place, and maybe even more than that. And so, just just the financial aspect of collaboration is amazing. And then, but what that does to stress levels and the ability to sleep at night, things like that. Um, to watch some of the stories in this chapter, she talks about Bangladesh and how there was, I think it was Bangladesh, there was a huge concert, Live Aid. I remember that. I remember that huge concert, and there was all this inpouring of financial assistance sent, and maybe it wasn't Bangladesh. I can't remember, but anyway, um, it saved a lot of lives. But then that can only continue so long, you know. Um, Charity is a wonderful thing for like an emergency situation, but then there really has to be some kind of a plan because one, either the people that are giving the money run out of money to give, or um, they see another disaster that has much more immediate need, so they shift their money over there. One of the things that this chapter brought out that I kind of already knew, but I was surprised at the numbers, is that most charity, I think it was 80 some percent, most charity comes from people that make less than 150,000 a year, and I would say even less than 50,000 a year, quite honestly. Like I see that all the time. The people that have the least give the most, and that actually very small amounts of charity are really driven through these organizations and things that mostly, I mean, they may coordinate it, but most of the donations and stuff are not coming from organizations or big foundations and things. It's the little guy that's, giving up their Starbucks coffee or whatever they get, that they decide they're going to put that towards something else. And I think that's because, until you've suffered a hardship or gone through, a really challenging time like that, you just don't have as much compassion. Like once you're there yourself, you have a lot of compassion. Then when you see somebody else in that situation, you just find a way to help. And just like, you know, in the beginning, we were talking about how everything is perfect, like it's all set up perfectly. I have found that, if I feel the need to give to a certain um, person or organization or whatever it is, if I feel like, oh, I should give something to that, and then my monkey mind kicks in and says, oh no, how are you going to pay the rent, blah blah blah, you can't give anything. If I just go ahead and give, somehow that money gets replaced, oftentimes more than what I gave, which is the amazing thing. I don't know how it works. Like I can't explain how any of this works. These are just observations that I make. If I have a lot of resistance to giving, if I feel like I should give and I have a lot of resistance and then I don't give, then I don't get it back. But if I just drop the resistance and say, okay, my heart, I'm feeling that tug at my heart, I need to give. I give what I can. It's always replaced. I don't know. It's the most amazing thing. And if I feel like, you know, sometimes we're called to give in other ways, not just money, but by service or whatever. And that's actually a harder one because, at least for hermit people, because then you have to interact with, with people, and maybe you're already struggling to get enough sleep or whatever, and you're thinking, oh my God, how am I going to find another hour to volunteer for this, that, or the other? But like the most amazing friendships come out of that sort of thing, like here on the Saturday Morning Mastermind. The most amazing friendships have developed just by basically volunteering an hour a week. Um, it's strange how we're pulled exactly to where we need to be. Like our attention is pulled exactly to where it needs to be at exactly the right moment. And I'm talking sometimes this stuff is coordinated down to the second. Like it's crazy. I mean, I know you've experienced that too, Samantha.
Yeah, it is amazing how that happens, and you know, I can't really think of a thing right off the top of my head. You're talking, and I'm like, oh, what was a time? And I can't think of a time at the top of my head. It'll come to me. Um, but more often than not, it's for us, it's been kind of bigger picture kind of stuff. Like when way back when we were struggling with I had, I had sold my salon and we were in our trucking business, and then the economy went kaplooey. And so then we lost our trucking company, and we were kind of sitting there going, crap, what do we do? And then this whole different, completely another opportunity shows up, and it's a collaboration with my husband and a friend that he knows, and he's got family in this one area, and he owned dump trucks, and the work down there wasn't working out. But then there was this big project up in Northwest Indiana for putting in windmills up in that area, and his friend couldn't take his trucks and just make that happen because he had a family, and she had a job down there, and it just so happened that we were in a situation where we didn't have anything at the time, employment wise, other than just I had a part-time job, and well, actually I had a full-time job, but it was just a job, random job. And then my husband didn't have anything that he was doing, and granted we had kids in school and whatnot, but we because of our life situation at the time, it made sense for us to just pick up and move up to the Northwest Indiana. And we took the dump trucks with us for, from my his friend's business, and then we just kind of operated his business for him up in the northern part of the state doing that project, and that just ended up working out perfectly. And it's weird how that happens, right? I mean, we just never know what's going to be around the corner for us, and it just surprises me. It always surprises me. So it's pretty exciting, and I can think of other situations where I was like when I had my pet salon, there was a time back when before I had it, I was working in someone else's salon, and things were just not going the best way that I would really wanted it to go, and I was looking for another opportunity, or I was looking to try and do something on my own, and then just out of the blue, this vet calls me and she's like, "Hey, I'm opening a clinic up in Westfield, and we really want to have grooming at our place, and but we don't know anything about it. Would you be interested in just leasing some space from us and running a thing out of here?" I'm just like, "Oh, sure, And but it's funny how that works. I just yeah, I don't know. It's funny, but anyway, the world works in mysterious ways, right? Let's see what else this book has to say. Okay. Okay, it says, okay, so when we find sufficiency and sustainability, and sustainable prosperity, we find sufficiency and sustainable prosperity when we think of our resources as a flow that is meant to be shared, when we put our full attention on making a difference with what we have, and we partner with others in ways that expand and deepen that experience. And that kind of, I mean, just what I was just talking about when we took the dump trucks up north. I mean, what resources did we have at the time? We didn't have any, or I didn't feel like we really had any, because we were in the middle of bankruptcy and foreclosure, and our business was crashing. Like what, financially, we didn't have any resources, but we had the physical capability of doing something. And then his friend, he had the resources as far as the equipment goes and the funding, but he didn't have the labor. So it just worked out well for both of us. And it was just a wonderful situation. And because of that, we developed some new friendships and just some new different situations and had a whole nother life experience. And just from moving completely to a new place, and it's just amazing how that works. But let's see, what else is it saying? Reciprocity allows us to acknowledge each other in appreciation of our unique gifts. To recognize, lift up, and shine a light on beauty of reciprocal relationships and interactions in our lives is to uncover vast reservoirs of existing wealth that we have taken for granted. In reciprocity, there is nourishment and joy. I am there for you, and you are there for me. And she goes on as she was talking about this one woman who had a couple of kids, Tracy, I think it's her name. And Tracy went through a divorce, and she was kind of struggling in that situation. But she had some friends over in Japan. Is that what she said? Yeah, over in Japan. And they had a family, and they were struggling with the loss of a new baby. And she was like, "I just need to get out of here," and was telling them that, and they were like, "Well, just come over here and live with us for a while." And so she took her family over there, and they got together, and they lived in the house there, and they helped each other out, and their kids became fast friends, and they just had a grand situation going on because of that collaboration. And then when she eventually came back to the States, she is telling another friend of how well that worked out. And that friend was like, "Oh, well, then we can do that here." And so even though she was making this very small amount of annual income compared to the average, family, she was able to team up with another family, and they were able to live in a great school district and a great house, and they were to work together, and everybody had what they needed. And I just think that that is just so fascinating. And I wonder sometimes, where do we cut ourselves off from these types of opportunities that we could, collaborate, because we think we're supposed to be a certain way, or we think we're supposed to act in a, you know, uh, we should be able to take care of ourselves, and we should be able to be on our own. I don't know. It's like a weird mental block or something where, if we work together with somebody to better ourselves, that somehow we're less than because we couldn't do it on our own. I don't know. I don't get that. And I don't know. Maybe that's just things that I've thought. I don't know. Not necessarily, but I don't know. We kind of get weird things in our heads, and then we just won't let go of it. I don't know. What was another story in here she was talking about, Catherine?
I love the tea house story.
Tea house one. Is that, I don't remember that one.
Yeah, she talked about a group of ladies. I forget what country. I think it was in Africa somewhere. And there were 7 or 8 ladies, I guess, and they wanted to collaborate to make a tea house, because they lived near a village where a lot of people traveled down the road to get to that village to buy supplies and stuff. So they thought, okay, we want to build this tea house for the travelers to stop and get some comfort along their way, and but they were mostly elderly women, and they couldn't, like, they didn't have a way, they couldn't walk to go get the supplies they needed to go get the tea for the tea house, and they didn't have the money for the actual tea, or the teacups, or the kettle, or the thing to cook it with the water on. They did manage to build a small circular hut, basically out of, trees and just dirt and just stuff that was like there on the land. But they didn't know, how they were going to get the supplies or anything. They just knew that this is what they wanted to do. And so Lynne was able to provide the teacups and the kettle and stuff like that, things that they needed financially. And then there was a younger lady, I think, that lived in the village where everybody bought the supplies, and she had the youth and the strength and the stamina to make the walk back and forth from the village to the tea house. So she agreed to, purchase their supplies and deliver their supplies to them monthly, or whatever the arrangement was. So I thought that was just a great story. They wanted to, I'm sure it gave them a lot of uh, energy. That's another thing that this talks about, and it mentioned it in the first story that we started talking about, with the car, with the brakes that broke down. And she was, in that story, she was completely exhausted. Like, here she is just trying to, get home or whatever, and the brakes go out, and she's just exhausted, and she just wants to get home. And then, they're having the party, and they tell her if she can play the piano. Well, some people, not Lynne, but some people would have just been like, no, I'm too exhausted, but she played for like an hour or so at the party, and when she left, she was completely energized. And I find that to be um, very true. When some of these, I call them synchronicities, when some of these synchronicities happen, like, you can be so exhausted and just like at the at your wit's end, and you just don't know what you're going to do or how you're going to do it, and all of a sudden this synchronicity happens, and this camaraderie shows up, something shows up, and it completely energizes you. And I'm sure that every one of those women, you know, they wanted to do the tea house, but they just didn't know how they were going to do it. And then suddenly Lynne shows up with the finances, and the young girl shows up with the ability to deliver their supplies. And I'm sure it just energized their whole beings, you know, and think about all the people then that were traveling down this road and were exhausted themselves, and now they can step into this, you know, little hut of comfort and have a warm tea and I'm sure amazing conversation, and how much that energy just got passed along from person to person after that. I just thought it was a great little story.
Yeah, it took me a minute to remember that story. I actually listened to this chapter on my way to work earlier this week, and then I reread about 2/3 of it this morning to remind myself of all the stories, and that was one that I had forgotten about. That's a good one. And one thing that I was kind of that came to my mind for that, and when you were talking about her playing the piano and being energized, is I feel like when we're just working for money, it feels like work. But when we're working together to accomplish something, to, collaborate on something, it feels like play. Or if it's not play, it's just life, enjoying life and working together. And so I wonder, I mean, is that really, is that just, it's one of the, so how can we make all aspects of our life like that, where it just feels like that's life and it's fun, and versus I have to go to work and do this thing in order to get the money to pay the bills, and if we were to collaborate more with more people, it would just be more enjoyable, and we would have more energy, and I wonder sometimes, I don't know. It's just a thought. Um, Something else came up for me when you were talking. What the heck was it? Dang it. When that happens. But in my notes here, I have one other thing is that, this whole chapter kind of reminds me of that. Well, it doesn't remind me of the show, but it brought it to mind. Is there's a show, it's like a bartering show, and the guy's going, and he's deciding that he wants some item, and then so then he has to go to work to find the item that that person wants or needs in order so he can make a trade with them. And so then he goes around to different people that have things for trades, and then he tries to work with them to figure out what how he can fulfill their needs so that they can fulfill his. And I thought that was just a really interesting show. And I mean, I think probably the average person watches that show and they're just like, oh, it'd be so cool to get something that's worth more than whatever. And but I see the collaborative effort of it, and the effort that he goes to really try and work with someone to get them what they want, and the work that, and they help each other out in that way. And I think that's just a really fascinating thing, and or fun. And how many other opportunities could we have by just doing that? But one other thing that she talks about in this chapter is the nature aspect, and where she's talking. Let's see if we can find a little section here where she is. Let's see, the true law of the jungle, and she's talking about 19th century scientific and economic theorists painted a harsh picture of the natural world, describing competition for food and other resources as the inevitable and defining force by which nature balanced population and resources. And then she goes on to talk about Charles Darwin and the survival of the fittest, and how we've kind of gotten it in our heads because of maybe those theorists on that's the way it's supposed to be in the people world. And so we've kind of taken on this attitude of survival of the fittest, and whoever can do the best and overcome everyone else is the best or whatever. And but then yet at the same time she goes on to talk, she's like, nature really isn't like that. When a lion goes out to kill something, he kills only what he needs to survive. He doesn't go out on a killing rampage and kill the whole herd just for fun. And and that is somehow, people have taken on that. They're the ones that have taken on this whole attitude of, conquer and destroy versus collaboration and let's all work together. And then what else was she saying in here? The other one thing that it reminded me of, the whole nature aspect of it and cooperation, and we really observe nature, we can see that it isn't just one thing overtaking another, one species overtaking another. I mean, they do kind of work together. And I was reading a book just recently that I got on, it was like Amazon Kindle free reads or something like that. And it was The Secret Life of Trees. I don't know if you've ever heard of that one, but it's a really interesting and fascinating study on trees and the inner working of trees and how they work together in the natural, like in a natural forest, not a planted forest, but in a natural forest. They work together with fungi and other plants and trees and everything else to be able to support the whole environment versus just one tree trying to outdo the other one. And I just found a fascinating perspective on trees, but stuff that I never even realized was even possible of, trees sharing nutrients with fungi. And it was just interesting, but well, we're getting into the top of the hour. You want to give a final wrap up, Catherine, and before we go for today? Final thoughts?
Well, I actually saw a program on that, Secret Life of Trees. That's funny that you bring that up. Nature is very collaborative, and you're right. A lion kills and eats, till it's full, and then it leaves the rest for the birds or, whoever else needs to scavenge and hunt. Like, it doesn't just sit there and guard every little scrap until there's nothing but bones or whatever. And but she has it written in here as well about the story of the eagle and the condor, which I thought was very interesting, that some of the collaborations that we're seeing now were actually written as part of a creation story or whatever. I'm not sure which country it came from. Might have been Africa or Africa's continent, but you know what I mean. Like, I don't know whose story it is, but it spoke about the people of the eagle and the people of the condor, and it was kind of referring to, the eagle people as being, which I kind of drew a connection between Atlantis, the Atlantis story, with this as well, because if you've ever studied much about Atlantis, it was a very technologically advanced society, and that's what they're talking about with these people of the eagle, that they're very technologically advanced. And then the people of the condor are very spiritually advanced. And their creation story said that, the world would come to a point where, people were starting not to exist. And then these two peoples, the people of the eagle and the people of the condor, who were one in the beginning, but then went their separate ways, they have to come back together to help one another exist again, and then everything will flourish again. And I think we get too far off on one path. I mean, we always talk about balance and how important that is, and but then we forget we talk about how important it is, but then we totally forget about it. And and go back to our work or whatever. And like you said, is it just work or is it working with a vision? If you are working on a vision, it doesn't feel like work. It feels fulfilling and it's energizing. It's not draining. Yes, you still get tired. You still require sleep and things, but there's a difference between your body being tired and your soul being tired. Sometimes I get to the point where I just feel like my soul is so tired, and that's kind of a wake up call to me. And I go, okay, so you're focusing on the wrong things. You need to redirect yourself back into a vision, because it provides that spark. It somehow provides that extra fuel. It makes those short nights of sleep okay. Like, I don't know how, but it does. And she was talking in here about how what you were referring to about nature, and when she was talking about the eagle and the condor, and it says here, economics say, or like the people of the eagle would say, compete. Only by pitting yourself against a worthy opponent will you perform efficiently. The reward for successful competition will be growth. You will eat up your opponents one by one, and as you do, you will gain the resources to do it some more. The earth says, or the people of the condor would say, compete, yes, but keep your competition in bounds. Don't annihilate. Take only what you need. Leave your competition enough to live. Whenever possible, don't compete. Cooperate. Pollinate each other. Build firm structures that lift smaller species up to the light. Pass around the nutrients. Share the territory. Some kinds of excellence rise out of competition. Other kinds rise out of cooperation. You're not in a war. You're in a community. And I think that's so beautifully said. And when we get out of balance, we forget that last part. We feel like we're in a war. We feel like we're in a survival mode. And pretty much anything goes when you're in survival mode. You can be rude, you can be whatever, and it's okay because you're surviving, but that's not, like, we put ourselves there. We put ourselves in that mode. We're not in a war, we're in a community. And one of the things that social media has done for me, a lot of people badmouth social media, but it opened me up to have friends in other places and cultures that I never would have. And it has helped me grow that community, even though I'm somewhat negligent because I'm tired. I don't get on there enough. But to be able to reach across the world, and many of us have been I was raised in a very racist family, and thank goodness I didn't buy into that aspect of it. But I think a lot of people, even if they don't come from a racist family, they're still told that, quote, others are this or that or the other, and they have all these preconceived notions, and it does drive wars. It drives space and wars between people. But when you just open up a chat with somebody in another culture, in another country, you find out, like, you're talking to your best friend that lives next door. We're all human. We all want the same basic things. And so social media is great to be able to get rid of a lot of the ignorance, like we have been taught, to be so competitive with each other instead of cooperative. And I'm seeing, I get to talk with a lot of young people because I live in a college town and I'm a rideshare. And, I'm very encouraged at times with the conversations that I'm having, because the future generations are seeing the need for more, going back to where we were before, more of a community, more collaboration, that everybody just can't stand on their own, and they're realizing that. And so that gives me hope, because for a while I wasn't having much hope. I was like, boy, we've really messed this up again, but I think we're going to pull it off. So there's more great stories in this book, and maybe we'll hit on some more of them next week. I think we're on chapter 8 next week or something.
Yep, chapter 8 will be next, and it's part 4 of this book, Change the Dream. So it's going to be interesting to see where we go with that. And yep, so it's been a great chat today, guys. I hope that you found some value from this. And if you have, then by all means, click like on this video. Share it with somebody that you think would find it helpful. And if you'd like to participate with us and be a part of this conversation and share your thoughts on these things that we're talking about, then jump into our Facebook group. You can find us by going to mindsetmasterycollective.com, and that'll take you right into our Facebook group where you can ask to join and then ask to participate with us. So guys, we'd love to have you, and we've enjoyed this chat. So we'll see you next week on the Saturday Morning Mastermind. Bye for now.